All right, everybody, it's good to see you again. I am Benjamin Parker, joined by Simon Short. Once again, we're going through the offensive lines. We are covering and grading every single offensive line. We're not quite at the halfway point, but tonight we're doing the AFC West. Simon, how you feeling about tonight?
I'm excited, man. I'm ready to let you just like let loose. I feel like you've let me do my thing for these three divisions. I have a feeling I'm not going to get to do that. So at this point here, at exactly our halfway point, I think we're just going to let you go crazy. This is your division. This is your backyard. I'm excited to hear what you got to say.
Yeah, and obviously, as you know, I cover the Chiefs. I'll have a whole lot more to say about the Chiefs than I do the other three teams, but I'll try to keep it to a minimum as we go through. This is a collaboration. Simon Short has the Simon Short podcast on his own. We are both kind of linked through Phantom Sports. So check out a lot of great articles over there and stuff on YouTube as well. And then I've got the sports and money side of things on YouTube, two different sports and money channels, all of which I post content when I can. So feel free to go and check out all of that. And tonight we're back to do our special project for the summer. That is the offensive line, and it is the AFC West, and it is the Kansas City Chiefs. So, Simon, go ahead and lay out what you think the five starters kind of project to be for Kansas City.
I think we're already gonna be split apart here, which I'm very excited to hear. We've had this conversation a lot, but left to right, it's gonna start out pretty easy. Orlando Brown Jr., Joe Tooney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. And then I think they're going to give Lucas Niang another shot at right tackle to figure that thing out and hopefully stay healthy. Andrew Wiley. I don't know if you could call it a competition as much as Kansas City's just waiting for Niang to kind of lose that spot. They want it to be him. I think they like his athleticism, but I think Wiley's just there like, hey, when he messes up or anybody messes up, I'm over here if you need me. So don't think they're directly competing, but I think if Niang gets hurt or doesn't perform that well, Wiley's going to be right there to step in. So I think Niang's going to get the nod, and as long as he's healthy, I think it's his. But Wiley's there ready.
Yeah, you're 100% right. They really want Niang to step up and finally take over that right tackle spot. I don't think it's going to happen. Now he may get the starting spot, but I really don't. I haven't seen enough to think that he's actually going to be able to hold it and keep it. So he may even start the season there at right tackle. The problem that they have is Andrew Wiley is good enough at the guard spot. He could start at guard for probably 20, 24 NFL teams pretty easily, but he's not the best tackle. He really doesn't have the tools necessary to be a great tackle, but he works so hard. He's so consistent. He's very intelligent that you can plug him in at right tackle, and they did for most of last year. Was it great? No. Were they hurting a little bit? Yes. Would they really want Niang to win that starting spot? Yes. They're going to give Niang every chance to win it, and he's probably going to get the starting nod. But there may be a chance. There may be a point somewhere in the season if Niang continues to struggle where Wiley just kind of steps back in. But that's certainly not what Kansas City wants to happen. So, talk to me a little bit. We may even disagree a little bit, but talk to me a little bit about maybe who the studs are on this offensive line as we're looking at the top five before we kick over into the depth.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those groups that you could really point to anybody and have a case to argue. Creed Humphrey is my guy, another guy that I wish the Steelers had taken, last year. They're paying for that a little bit, but a guy that I think everyone very clearly sees should have been a first-round pick, even though he's a center. He came in right away, and I think only took him a couple of weeks to really establish himself as one of the better centers in the league. Does it with a great combination of power and athleticism. I think I'll always think back to him at the draft, right? And then everybody was at home, and he was sitting there in his living room, and I think he was wearing jeans and a sleeveless plaid shirt, and he had his camo hat on, and there was a I don't know what it was. I don't go hunting, but he had some sort of animal's head on his back mantle right behind him.
Right.
And he's just sitting there, like you can tell he's just so mad at everybody. I'm like, that guy's just gonna come into the league and he's gonna just kill everybody. It's gonna be so. I love him. I think he's a stud, but also Joe Tooney's been doing it at a high level for a really long time. So you could point to him. Trey Smith is a guy that going into his final year of college football, people thought was going to be a first round tackle. And at worst, yeah, you kick him to guard and he's going to be great. But you take that talent in the first round, a lot of injuries happen and some medical concerns, and he ends up being a 6th round pick. That's a starter from day one, also really good. Orlando Brown Jr., I think, is the most well known name. And I know you'll have a lot to say about this, but a guy that has a lot of really positive traits. Now, do they kind of connect with what Kansas City likes to do? Not always, right? He made his name and got his, glory as a run blocking right tackle in Baltimore, and he's amazing at that. The few run times that Kansas City runs, you still see it, and it's awesome. But then he wants to play left tackle. He comes to Kansas City, gets to be left tackle. Now he's in pass pro a lot. It's not his strength, but that's obviously the name, and I think he made another Pro Bowl last year. That's the name everybody knows and points to. And based on talent and pedigree and just pure football ability, you could easily point to him as well, and it'd be hard to argue against. So another group that you could point to 4 guys and say that's the best player and be right, and that's a good place to be in when it comes to offensive line.
It really is. Now, I could talk about Brown for a long time, but what you're talking about with Humphrey and Smith and Tooney, I'm going to stay on the positive side here for a while, probably. Tooney is a lockdown, forget about it starter, Pro Bowler all the way. And he will be for, I think, as long as he ever wants to play this game. He's just that consistent. Do I think he's an elite Hall of Fame level guy? I don't think so, but he's the guy you lock in at starter and you write it in ink, and you can do that for the next decade if you want to. That's just Tooney. Creed Humphrey looks like he has the potential to be, if he's not already, to be the best center in football for the next decade. The only caveat I'll say with Humphrey is not many teams tested him up the middle too ferociously last year. That just wasn't the way defenses were playing Kansas City. They had other concerns and other techniques they were using. So we haven't necessarily seen Humphrey go through the fire the way we saw some other rookies. But every chance Humphrey gets to play, he just keeps showing us how good he is. So I don't expect that to change, even if teams do start trying to push up the middle a little bit. And Trey Smith over at right guard, Trey Smith is the most talented guy on the line. He hasn't yet gotten so efficient that he's the best offensive lineman on the team. But in terms of pure talent, you mentioned that this guy should have been drafted in the first round were it not for the medical concerns. He's amazing. The level of talent that he flashes, he could be. I don't mean to stick a label on the guy. Smith has the kind of talent that leads you to multiple All-Pros and eventually maybe even Hall of Fame level capabilities. He's got that. So love Smith. He's still a little inconsistent, still a little sloppy. So who knows if he'll get to that level or not. But Smith has the ability to just dominate at times. And we'll see. And you mentioned Wiley over there at tackle. So good starting group here. The Chiefs have done a good job developing this. That's their starting 5. You get over to the depth a little bit. Let's assume Niang wins the job that punches on. And I'm sorry, I mentioned Wiley at right tackle. Niang at right tackle. Wiley becomes the depth guy, and he is quality depth everywhere. Wiley just is. Kennard drafted in the 5th round. I think we both like Kennard. I think he contributes at some point somewhere. Really like Kennard, and then after that you have Austin Ryder, who should not be a starter in the NFL at center. But if you had to, you wouldn't hate it. He's been a starter for Kansas City before, I think for 2 years. So having him as the backup center is fantastic. This is fantastic. So they basically have 3 guys for depth here, unless Wiley becomes a starter, and then Niang really isn't that great of a depth piece, and then you're kind of down to 2 guys. So that's where the depth sits. If a couple of injuries start to hit Kansas City, they might be in a little bit of trouble here. But there's a lot of good stuff going on here. How do you like the depth here for the Chiefs?
I like it okay. I think when you have a guy like Wiley and another point to Niang becoming the starter is just because Wiley is so indispensable when it comes to being a backup, because when you're writing out your depth chart, you could literally write him second at basically every position. I don't know if you're really putting him at center. you really don't want to see him at left tackle, but you could put him there and at least know what you're getting snap to snap, and you can plan around it. Then it's not going to
Right.
be, I have no idea what's going to happen. Somebody could be on the quarterback in a second. We'd have no idea. You know what the strengths are. So I like that piece. I really like Darian Kennard. I would have been happy with him being, a second round pick for any team. A guy that really productive, had a lot of SEC games under his belt at right tackle and just dominated in the run game, especially. So again, a little on that Orlando Brown case, right? Like, this guy's a really good run blocker. Can he hold up as a pass blocker, which I think is why in the NFL he translates to more of a guard. So Wiley and Kennard are both kind of that tackle guard, flexible kind of players. I think that's a good place to be. I think Jaron Christian, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but I think he has some potential. I know some Washington fans liked his couple starts that he had at tackle. And then, like you said, Ryder, I mean, we talked about none of these guys are really centers, even though they can play guard. So it's good to have that guy who not only has a lot of center experience, but has it in your stadium. I think that's a good place to be. So I like the depth. Again, I don't think any of it is necessarily, other than Wiley, something you want to see for more than a week or two, and forget about it if it's more than one injury at a time. But I think if Wiley, has to start for Niang, let's say Niang gets hurt and you have to start Kennard for a week, you're okay with that. If you have to start Ryder for a week, you're okay with that. Anything more than that, I think, is where you're going to start running into trouble, especially since we don't know exactly what this offense is going to look like this year. It's going to be a little bit different than what we've seen. So you want as much continuity with that offensive line, considering the other pieces around them have changed.
It's a fascinating look at the Chiefs offense. We won't talk about all of it this video. But if you got to put out a grade on the Kansas City Chiefs, where are you coming out at on all things considered?
All things considered, if I was just going to say talent, it's an A group talent-wise. I think kind of factoring in what these guys are maybe best at, I'll go down a little bit and say B plus. Again, just because, and I'm going to keep saying this because I'm trying to bait you. You're avoiding it so far. Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle is just not the best fit that you want, but he's still good, right? But you don't unlock the best parts of him, which I think hurts the group overall. But yeah, Tooney, just super solid, consistent. Creed Humphrey, I'm excited to see what he could be this year. Could, like you said, be the best center in the entire league, considering all the other guys that are kind of up for best center in the league are in their, mid-30s just about. Trey Smith, I think, is really incredible. I have a feeling that he's going to clean up any of that sloppiness. And, when his technique is on, and it's on more often than not, it's like textbook stuff, man. I mean, that guy he gets his punch out so fast, his arms stay extended so quick, and his feet are just always moving. And that just, oh my gosh, it's so great. Yeah. So even with that, even with Orlando Brown not being necessarily a great fit, even with the Niang Wiley thing kind of being, up in the air, that interior is so good. This group could definitely be an A, and they are an A talent-wise. I'll pull them back to B plus just a little bit until we see exactly how the offense looks. Can this team maybe play to its strength in terms of these guys and run a little bit more? And then again, that depth piece, that also hurts them a little bit. I don't love the depth, so I think B plus is where I'm going to land.
All right, and I'm not far off of that. I'm somewhere in the B flat range. I think is where I'm going to settle in at. If I was going to go anywhere, I might tilt it back toward B minus. This is going to be where I'm going to ding those tackles a little bit, including Brown. And again, I don't mean to rip them apart, but this is just what I see on the videos. Both tackles, and this includes Orlando Brown, both tackles really struggle against edge rushers. And you might say, well, everybody does, but these guys really struggle against edge rushers, the good ones. Even anybody who's just fast, they don't have to be dominant, but the guys who are fast off the edge. And oh, by the way, the AFC West, the teams who didn't already have edge rushers loaded up on edge rushers this year. So it's something that the rest of the division noticed last year, and it's probably not going to change too much this year. What they're trying to do is kind of compress that clock that Patrick Mahomes has to work with, and They already did it last year. And what the Chiefs got forced into last year was using a second tight end to do nothing but pass protect. And so you basically have 6 offensive linemen, and they're not even doing it to play big ball. They're just doing it to help out the tackles on the edges. And if even one of these tackles could do a little bit better job of handling those edge rushers, then you could tilt your blocking assignments over to help out the other tackle. But you're trying to do both tackles, and it's just a bit too much in the Kansas City offense. So that, plus the fact that the depth is fine, but it's not super deep. You know, you go about 2 injuries and you're starting to hurt. You're really starting to hurt a lot here if you're Kansas City. So that's why I'm starting to settle in on a flat B. I think it's a good offensive line. I don't think it's a great offensive line, but I do think it's better than most of the offensive lines we're going to see on football. I don't think there's any question about it. I'm gonna hit that Trey Smith again. We talked in the last video about Zach Martin and how good he was at anchoring.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Trey Smith, I think, is about as good with his hands. Now he does a good job moving his feet, but Trey Smith seems to have some of the best hands in the NFL. His ability to, you mentioned it, to punch, but even after he gets his punches out, he's just kind of rolling guys and handling them. It is amazing. It's fantastic to watch. And you said it, he's more on with his technique than he is off. If he can clean up the sloppiness, he could be one of the best offensive linemen in the entire game. There's no question about it. That's there. So I'm not too far off of you. I'm not as high as you on this team, but I guess I'm not as high as you on any offensive line.
So it's not many places I show up and I'm the optimist. So this makes me feel really good. This is good for me. I enjoy this.
I've been telling people in other videos, you have your cup of Kool-Aid here that is presented to you by, your local affiliates, and there's the bucket of cold water that is presented to you by Benjamin Parker.
That happens. I'm here. Hey man, look, if I can raise the morale a little bit around here, I'm happy to do it.
Yes. All right. Anything else you want to cover with Kansas City here? I feel like we've done a pretty good job here on this.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Talented group. We'll see if they can just keep it up.
Right. They'll be fine at offensive line. It's not bad. It's just it is also not perfect either. Moving over to a very different group, the Denver Broncos. I don't want to say they're polar opposites, but they are very different. Go ahead and talk us through what you think might be the starting 5 here for them.
So the good news for Denver Broncos fans is there is some decent depth. There's a lot of names to play with here. The bad news is none of them are stellar. And once you get to maybe the 3rd guy, you're not super excited. So left to right, what I'm going with right now is Garrett Bowles, Dalton Risner, Lloyd Cushenberry III, Graham Glasgow, and Billy Turner. Other names you've got in there competing, Quinn Miners, that either at that center position even could be pushing Cushenberry, I think, a bit, or at right guard with Glasgow. Nate Moody isn't necessarily in competition, but that's a decent depth piece that I like. He started a couple games last year, and I think if all goes right, you could see him hopefully competing for a spot. It's enough of a competition to discuss. Tom Compton is a vet, came over from San Francisco, I believed. I think he'll be in competition with Billy Turner at right tackle, especially if Turner is, because he's flexible, he's played multiple positions. If he's kind of competing, they could be looking at him at guard. Compton's a guy that could be in position for a tackle spot. I think the left side is pretty secure, though. I think Bowles and Risner are pretty set. Cushenberry, I think, is going to be center. I like enough of what he does, but I think Miners is going to be pushing him. Turner, I think, is front runner right tackle. Glasgow, we'll see. I think one of these guys could be an upgrade, whether it's Miners or not, or like I said, maybe Billy Turner goes there, Compton at right tackle, but I think he's going to end up getting that spot from day one.
I basically agree with everything that you say there. Now, we'll probably won't have identical grades just because we tend to skew a little bit differently, but I like Garrett Bowles at left tackle. I think that's the guy you just lock in at starter and you don't even think about upgrading until he gets too expensive or too old. I think, you're fine there. After that, though, there are some other guys who have potential, but it almost feels like you have maybe 6, 7, maybe even 8 guys after that who, I don't want to say they're interchangeable, but their talent levels are very, very close. They're very, very similar. There's not a lot of difference, which on the bad side means you're not very talented, but on the good side means that you have some decent guys that, once the injuries start to kick in, you're not getting destroyed here on the offensive line, I think. So I see it almost the same way as you. Let's assume that those are the five starters: Glasnow, Cushenberry, Turner, Risner, and Bowles. And that leaves you then with the depth, which would be Miners, which would be Compton, which would be Wattenberg, which would be Anderson. I think you mentioned one other guy who I'm forgetting at the moment.
Moody.
Yeah, Moody, exactly. The depth is pretty good. The starting line isn't great, but there's a lot on the table here for the Broncos. I really think that you have a lot of good things kicking in here, even though the talent level might be a little bit kind of hitting a ceiling, if you will.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's kind of, not pick your poison, but it's, it's different flavors, right? So they could have gone out and tried to get, a Teron Armstead, a Connor Williams, a Brandon Sheriff, spend big money on one guy and really, but then you really rely on that person, right, to really elevate your group. We've talked about that with some offensive lines so far. With Denver, it's it's not that they went out and made a bunch of moves to get some midline guys, but they know what they're expecting, and they're expecting this group to work together and grow. And if those starters are the starters together, I mean, those four players from left tackle to right guard all played together last year. Compton is new. Moody, like I said, had a couple starts. Miners had a few more starts. So if those guys get in, Billy Turner's really the only new guy to this group, and he's a vet. He's been around. They're hoping this group really works together, has good cohesion. And then, if they have to sub a guy in or two, those guys have starting experience, and a couple of them with this team, with these other players. So they're hoping that not being so reliant on one or two guys really helps them in the long run, I think.
Yeah, and I think it will, especially the way the Broncos have treated their offensive line now for probably 20, 25 years, really. They were some of the earliest, I think, to do more of the zone spread out kind of blocking schemes. And they really, as far as I've kept up with, they haven't moved off of that much. They're usually good on the offensive line, not great. I think that's about where they're going to be again this year, honestly. I don't see them dominating too many games, but I also don't see them getting destroyed in too many games. And with Russell Wilson back there, he's practiced his escapability for a long time now. So I think he'll be fine behind this offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, he's used to it. It's what he likes to do. He would rather run around, is what we've learned, than anything else. And we'll see, like, this group also, I think, is a little bit better if they're moving forward, right? So maybe it's going to be a little more of that run game that you're talking about, and that'll help them out. And then we'll finally get to see, because of Wilson being there, how much those skill players that everybody loves in Denver can bail them out of the situation. So hopefully this offensive line is just a small part of what this group is hoping to do.
You mentioned the running game. It's powerful. It can be devastating. And I think maybe as far as messing with linebackers and edge rushers' eyes, this team may do it more than anybody. You may have a lot of plays in which they are running the ball down your throat. While they may not be able to push you around in pass protection, I think they can with the running backs they've got do it in run blocking. And then you may have a lot of plays in which the offensive line is shifting left and Russell Wilson is doing naked bootlegs out to the right. And that's a lot to keep up with when you have the horizontal stuff going on with Wilson and the line, but then you have the north-south vertical stuff going on with the running backs. That can really start to mess with you a little bit. I think Denver has more of that than maybe anybody else in the league right now.
Yeah, and I mean these guys are physical, right? Especially if Quinn Miners gets out there, I mean that guy just wants to run people over. They have the ability with this group because of the power that they have, but also some of the athleticism that they have. They can do a lot of different things, and we could even see some sets with the offensive line where they're kind of off centered, right? And actually throw Billy Turner over there on the other side, and you're looking around, you're saying two tackles are over here together, and Glasgow's over there by himself. What's going on? And then all of a sudden, yeah, Jerry Judy's getting a end around or something like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Now, Mike Munchak, the famed offensive line coach, is not there this year, right? He left with the coaching change, so that's another thing that'll be really interesting to see what that looks like, what changes are maybe made from what we've been expecting. So be really cool to see, what they do. I like the players they have here. I'm interested to see them. But yeah, when we get to the grades here in a sec, the grades might not necessarily show that same nerdy interest that we have.
Right. And I'm about to pop it, but I will say, if any team, I think, and there's several of them, I think the Broncos are one of those teams who shouldn't be doing things the traditional way this year. I don't think Wilson's a traditional kind of a quarterback. I don't think the way the offensive line sets up that it should be a lot of the stuff that you just mentioned and that I just mentioned is, they punch you in the face with the running back, and then they shift left, shift right. Wilson bootlegs. Wilson's out there making plays, and then, oh, by the way, maybe you do the offset line that you mentioned, where you've got that sixth offensive lineman sitting off to one side. I'm not sure that the Broncos have more talent than some of the teams they're going to face, but I think they have enough talent to where if they mix it up and make things difficult scheme wise, I think they've got a chance here to do some good things this year.
100%.
Let's get into the grades then. Start off with you. What's the final grade here on the Broncos for this year?
I think I'm going to go just right down the middle. I think this is going to be an average group, so I'm going to give them a C. I like Bowles. I like Risner. I think those guys are the most talented players on this team. I like Billy Turner's versatility. But at the end of the day, I compare them to other teams around the league, and when I, in my head, try to kind of map them out, they're right in the middle for me. I don't see a world where they're terrible, right? Because even if we've talked about some of these teams, if a couple guys get hurt, you're worried. I think if by the end of the season, if Compton, Miners, and Moody are all on the starting line, and maybe you at least have one of Foles and Risner, if not even both of them, I think you're okay. And I don't think they're that much worse. So I have them completely average. Could go a little better, could go a little worse, but I have them as a C.
We finally found it. We finally found the
Yes.
first team where I'm a little higher than you.
Fantastic. Love it. There we go.
Not much. I'm at a C plus. Now, I may have graded them too high, but I'll tell you where I'm coming from with the C plus. Garrett Bowles, I really like him at left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
So in my head, he's the building block. You can basically forget about that side of the line with anybody you pair him with. And I think that's just a great way to build the offensive line. The talent drops off dramatically after that, but we talked about it. There's a whole lot of guys who you're okay with them being on the field and getting major playing time. You're not hurting. But I think I also have just an inherent trust that the Broncos franchise generally gets the offensive line most of the time in a good working situation. So combined with Russell Wilson back there at quarterback, I think I'm going to give them a C plus, which might be a little bit too high, but I'm comfortable with that. And I'm totally comfortable with the C that you're handing out as well. So we are not far off there. The Raiders, you've dug up some interesting things about the Raiders. So talk us through the Raiders first, and then if you want, you can jump in and give us the starting five. Okay.
My goodness, the Raiders, man. And I wish I could find this article again, but depending on where you look, you can find 10 to 12 different starting line combinations for the Raiders, and guys that are projected to be starters on one side are also projected to be cut from the team on another. So there's a lot going on here. So we're going to do our best to try and suss it out, just to keep things easy-ish, right? And I say easy-ish because we're digging into third and fourth string offensive linemen here.
Right.
From left to right, I've got it's the same as what ended up being the line last year for the majority of the season. I have Colton Miller, John Simpson, Andre James, Alex Leatherwood coming back in at right guard again, and then Brandon Parker at right tackle. Obviously, there's a lot of names also in the mix. I mean, Denzel Good, who was this team's starting guard 2 years ago, was supposed to be the starter last year,
yeah, in the second quarter of the season opener, he gets a torn ACL. He's still working back from that now. That's a
Yep.
guy that could be a starter, could be cut from the team. Jermaine Illuminor is a veteran that's on the team. He started 3 games last year before they moved Leatherwood into guard. He's still around. He's a guard or even right tackle kind of player as well as good. So those are 2 guys that could be in the mix for a starting spot. And then Dylan Parham, who they took in the middle of the draft, I believe day 2. That's a guy that could come in and compete for a guard spot as well. So I think Colton Miller's a lock at left tackle. Andre James is a lock at center. I think Alex Leatherwood is a lock somewhere on the right side, either at guard or tackle. From mini camps and OTAs, they're trying him out at right tackle again. But Josh McDaniels has said, you know what, we're going to see where he's best fit, and that's them saying he's going to play guard again. We just drafted him 17th overall, so we have to say he might be able to play tackle. And I like, I like Leatherwood. I think he has a lot of good traits. But I think based on the guy that would play next to him if he was the right tackle, unless Denzel Good is like healthy, completely ready to go, you feel good about him. I don't think you throw him in and make him play right tackle again this year, because that was a tough look last year for him. So that's what I have left to right. I think Good, Parham, and Illuminor are all kind of in the mix, especially, on the right side. I think John Simpson was one of the better guys over there at left guard last year. So I think he's going to end up being a lock, but as of right now, he's not even locked into the starting spot.
I agree. There's a lot of potential in here.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best thing that could happen for the Raiders is that Brandon Parker finally catches on at right tackle and locks it down. And then you don't have all that moving around stuff. You have your centers kind of tied in, your center tied in with James, and then you basically have 4 or 5 guys to pick from at the guard spots. But I don't think that's going to happen. Brandon Parker has never caught on. Colton Miller had a rough first season, but he's caught on fire ever since. And Miller might even get to be a star at left tackle. Who knows? But Miller's on the rise, and Parker unfortunately is not. And the Raiders, you kind of feel bad a little bit for the Raiders here. They've actually invested a lot of draft picks here in the offensive line. We've seen several teams who basically have ignored the offensive line draft-wise for the past few years. Not the Raiders. Raiders have put a ton of draft picks into this, and they haven't necessarily gotten their money's worth. Miller's good there at tackle, and Parker just hasn't caught on. So that opens the door for all of these combinations here and all of the stuff that the Raiders are dealing with, because, Parker hasn't locked in. So Denzel Good, you mentioned him. I watched him a couple of years ago on tape. Denzel Good, when healthy, is a very good offensive lineman. But again, he's coming off that injury. A lot of moving parts here for the Raiders. A lot of things can happen here for the Raiders. Let's talk about their depth for a second. Denzel Good is part of that. Alex Bars is in the mix somewhere at the bottom end. Dylan Parham, the 3rd rounder, you mentioned him. Thayer Mutford, 7th round pick. And you mentioned Illuminor. There's not a lot of depth here, but there are some pieces here. It's not horrible. It's not great. Anybody that really pops out to you here on the depth side of things for the Raiders?
I think just the guys we've talked about. But I think the key thing is those guys are position flexible. Parham can play both guard positions. Good can play both guard positions and right tackle, same as Illuminor. I even think, actually, one guy we haven't mentioned too much yet, Thayer Mumford from Ohio State. That's a guy that played some tackle in college, probably best suited at guard, but another guard that they can throw in there and see what happens. So yeah, I like all of them actually. And I think if, let's say, all of those guys are on your roster, and even your 4 backup offensive linemen, even though they're all primarily guard, if you can find someone to be your backup center, that's actually a pretty good group, considering you'd be fine if all of them were your starters. Now, again, a little like Denver, you're fine if they're all your starters because they're all just kind of average, but they all have their good qualities. And, again, as backups, you're pretty happy with it.
I agree. And I haven't done this every team, but if I could lay out the best case scenario for the Raiders, let's assume Brandon Parker isn't going to catch on, because I don't think that's going to happen at this point. But I do think Alex Leatherwood could. So if you have Miller at tackle and James at center, that's two positions that are kind of locked down. If Alex Leatherwood can settle into the guard spot and own it, I think he can actually. So I like Josh McDaniels being willing to give him the best opportunity at the best spot for him. That would settle out a lot of this too. Even if Brandon Parker doesn't settle in as a good right tackle, they can send the tight ends and the fullbacks over to help that end of things, because you've got, at that point, you would have left tackle covered, center covered, and one of the guard spots covered, and now you're looking at a very good offensive line with decent depth. So that's the best case. Now, worst case, Parker continues to struggle. Leatherwood can't seem to catch on at a position, and then that just opens the door for all kinds of other bad things to happen. So really need Parker or Leatherwood to step up here, probably Leatherwood, and that really would start to settle down this offensive line a lot, I think.
Yeah. If Leatherwood could figure it out and be their starting tackle, then they have all those other options at guard, because like you mentioned with Parker, when he's on, it looks awesome. He's got all the tools, but he just has so much trouble being on balance and staying there that he doesn't get to use any of them. So yeah, if you have another year of him and Leatherwood next to each other, it's going to be a rough group. But do you have the confidence that Leatherwood's ready for tackle? I don't quite, but if Good was healthy right now and he was in all the training camps and everything like that, I don't know if he's going to be ready for training camp. It's kind of unclear at this point. If he was, let's say, going to be in for a full training camp and he's already doing stuff this summer and he was going to be locked in at right guard and I felt like he could really help out Leatherwood, that would be one thing. But we didn't get to see that this year. We saw Leatherwood with Illuminor next to him, and that didn't go so well. Illuminor, while a steady vet, nice spot starter, can't do enough to help Leatherwood at right tackle. So if Good can be that guy like they wanted him to be, then I think you're in good shape. Or if, some of these other guys, if Parham can do it, right? If he can step in as an experienced guard, even as a rookie from his time at college, and him and Leatherwood can lock it down together, then that's good. But I'm not too hopeful for Leatherwood just yet. Even though, like I said, I like him. I'd even, like you said, if you just lock him in at guard and we just accept that's where he's at, then I think that's good shape. But right tackle makes me nervous.
Having that third offensive lineman locked in as a no doubt starter, they don't have to be a Pro Bowler. That's to me, that's kind of the tilting point. That's probably why my grades are so extreme. Is some of these teams only have one or two guys locked in. If they get that third guy locked in, it's almost like it tilts everything in the other direction. It allows you to have a more settled offensive line. You can mix and match at those final two positions, and then you have a little bit more depth to play with because you have three guys locked in the starters. If the Raiders can get that third guy to kind of lock in there, it could be massive for them this year. What's your final grade on them right now?
So if I had Denver at straight down the middle average, I got to give the Raiders just a step below that. I don't see this team being any better than, let's say, in the 15 to 20 range, right? If we were to rank the entire group, worst case scenario, if that right tackle position is just bad, then that's not good. Now, I do have some hope in the sense that if they lock in Leatherwood at right guard, I think he'll be even better than he was. And he's the guy helping out a below average right tackle, right? So I think that's what's going to end up happening. So I don't think it's going to be terrible because, like you, yeah, I like Colton Miller. I like Andre James at center. You're talking about a third offensive lineman. I like John Simpson. Now, again, he's not locked into anything based on the reports because they have so many guards. I ultimately think it'll be him, and I like him. So I think that left side of the line is set. So I don't think they're going to be terrible. And I think Leatherwood's okay. That right tackle makes me nervous. They won't be any better than average to me because of that. But I'll go step below average and say C- right now.
Yeah, I agree. We found our second team in which I'm a little higher than you.
On a roll, man.
We finally found them. We found the streak. It was on the AFC side of things, apparently.
That's right. We just need to get over here to the dark side. That's all.
Yes, exactly. Your point about Simpson is very fair. Even though he hasn't yet illustrated that he can lock down a position, I do think that that he's in the mix for that. That with a little bit more consistency, I do think he could lock down that guard spot, and that might be their third lockdown starter, and that would start to kind of be okay. Well, we're still not perfect, but we can tilt our coverages and our schemes. It's man, for offensive linemen, it's almost like you're skating on ice sometimes when you have leaks on two different ends of the ship, so to speak. If you can lock down something somewhere, those three spots, you can shift all of your blocking schemes a lot easier than when you're struggling. So, yeah, I think that's a fair point. I'm at a flat C for the Raiders. I don't think this team gets up into the B category. I don't really think that's on the table for them. I don't see this team being a disaster at offensive line, but it could go down from a C. It could be in the C- category, maybe even the D+ if everything's really going, falling apart. But I think they can hold their own this year. And you just love to see somebody step up and do something. We've talked about it before. The coaches are going to bed at night going, gee, I hope Leatherwood steps up this year, or I hope Simpson steps up this year, or I hope maybe Parker steps up this year, because it would just solve a lot of problems for us,
Oh, yeah.
So, all right, well, that's where we're at for them. That brings us to the Chargers, and the Chargers are interesting. Go ahead and walk us through our starting five for the Chargers.
So I think our starting five is going to be pretty easy to come across. I think it's going to be Rashawn Slater, Matt Filer, Corey Linsley, Zion Johnson, and then Chargers favorite Storm Norton, which I don't really get personally, and I don't think most people get, but I think the coaching staff likes it, and so that they kind of win out at the end. So I think that's going to be it from Jump Street.
This is where it gets really interesting, and we'll talk about the depth here in a second. But starting with Slater at left tackle. Slater has the potential. He hasn't yet accomplished it, but he has the potential to be all-pro year in and year out. And that might even possibly conceivably lead to some kind of a Hall of Fame talk. No, he's not there yet. He's not yet that dominant. But he is showing the flashes. You're getting these flashes of this stuff with Slater at left tackle. So he's a standout. Center Corey Linsley. I think Linsley personally is in the conversation for best center in football. Now, Humphrey may pass him, or Humphrey may already be ahead of him. Some people may still like Kelsey, even though I think Kelsey has lost just a little bit off his game. Linsley's amazing at center, really love. And Linsley is also battle tested, I think maybe more than Humphrey is at this point in his career. Filer at the guard spot is a lockdown starter there. You and I both like Zion Johnson coming out of Boston College with the draft. I think the more we looked at him and the more we went through the draft process, the better we liked him. I think Johnson's going to be fine there, and maybe even excellent there for the Chargers. And then I'm right there with you when it comes to Storm Norton. What little tape work I've done on him, I don't get it. I'm not. Maybe he's shown some growth during this offseason that we haven't had access to. But the game footage that we've got access to doesn't really illustrate that he should be a starter in the NFL. So, but again, if that's your only weak spot on the team and you've got him sandwiched between two other people, or not sandwiched him, if you got him beside somebody good, they can get by with it. Use a tight end, use a fullback, chip a little bit, you're okay. Any more thoughts there on the starting five there?
No, I mean, I'm with you on Corey Linsley. I just tried to look up like the All Pros again, right, from last year, thinking about it, because he was All Pro one first team 2 years ago. We mentioned him in a previous video, but Jason Kelsey was at this year, and the third guy on the list is Creed Humphrey. So those are the three guys, and Linsley as the guy that's 30 and in his prime versus 34, and Kelsey in his last year, and Creed Humphrey at 22 coming off his rookie season. Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely fair. We see what bringing in a top echelon center does for a young quarterback, right? We saw it was it last year with Rodney Hudson from the Raiders coming over to the Cardinals. Same thing here with Linsley when he came to the Chargers. That unlocked a lot for Herbert, I think. So I'm with you there. Matt Filer, I mean, I wish that guy was playing right tackle again. His best years in Pittsburgh came at right tackle, and we talked about this when Zion got drafted. We thought, he was going to take Filer's spot at left guard, and Filer was going to kick out to right tackle, take over for Storm Norton. That didn't happen. They let Schofield go, and we'll see if any changes happen. We'll talk about a guy I like later. But yeah, Slater, I mean, just a stud from day one. He's a guy you could move around if you really needed to. I remember there was talk about him being a center at one point when he was coming out. So his IQ and his technique and everything is all there right away. So yeah, I mean, this is a really good group. I'm really excited to see what Zion Johnson does because he was one of my favorite players in the draft. So yeah, I think it's awesome. Yeah, I think we hit everything there.
I'm going to state an opinion here on the Chargers starting five versus their depth, and I'll flip it back over to you to see if you can paint a better picture for me. I don't think there's another team, and we haven't covered all of them yet, but I haven't seen another team in which, to me, it appears like the starting four or the starting five are this much better than the depth that sits behind them. Let's assume Norton is the starter. That leaves you depth-wise basically with Pipkins, Hunter, Clapp, a couple other guys, and I don't see a lot of depth here. To me, one injury can drastically start to change the way this line looks. Now, you've looked at their depth a little bit more, so give me some hope here for Chargers fans that when any of these starters goes down, even Storm Norton, that we can feel good about the guys next man up.
I don't know. We started this video by talking about me being the eternal optimist, and now I have 2 grades lower than you, and I can't help you here. Here's the one thing I do like, and I'm actually combing through right now, and I know I did this after the draft. Jamari Sawyer from Georgia, rookie. They got him in the 6th round. This was a guy I would have bet a lot of money would have gone day 2 in the draft. Guy that has played tackle at the SEC level, played mostly guard last year, and that's what he's going to be best at the NFL level. Maybe this is where I finally get Matt Filer playing tackle. Maybe Sawyer will take that guard spot from him. I want to see it. That's a guy you can count on. All right. I again can't find why he slipped in the draft. If you weren't going first round at Georgia, I guess you have to go basically day 3. I guess that's the rule. But that's a guy that I think if he has to play any 4 positions that aren't center, you're happy with. I think he might even be an upgrade over Storm Norton. I think if you have to stick him at left tackle, sure, it's going to be a drop-off, but you can get out of a game there. And I think if you have to put him at guard, you're going to get a good player. I mean, that's a highly accomplished, proven SEC offensive lineman who has, and sometimes when that happens, you don't like their size or, they're accomplished because the guy next to them was a first-round draft pick. Sawyer was the best guy on that Georgia offensive line. He's NFL size appropriate, especially at guard. I think you're happy with that guy being back there. After that, not so much. And even with that, again, he didn't go till the 6th round, so maybe I'm missing something. I still can't find if there was an injury we don't know about, but for some reason he slipped to the 6th round. So maybe I'm over hyping him a little bit, but after him, man, it's dark.
I agree, and your point about Sawyer is spot on. That there is at least one player there that you do think would provide some depth. I hate to criticize the franchises because I'm looking at it in a vacuum, not in context. If I don't like the fact that the Chargers, who have a very legit shot at the Super Bowl this year, I don't like the fact that they haven't taken a little bit of extra effort to have at least a couple of guys back there who give at least a little more hope on the depth than this. I think they should have already had these guys in place, probably at least 2 more guys who are veterans. Don't have to be great. They give you at least some more hope than what you're getting on the guys who appear to be on the roster at the time, I will say. And maybe they can still do it. Maybe they can still add a couple of guys. But I think they should have already done it because you would hate for 1 or 2 offensive line injuries to be the reason that you don't beat that elite team in the playoffs, because I think everything else is kind of in place here for the Chargers to have a really awesome season. I would hate for offensive line depth to be the reason that you don't get there. So that's a little bit of criticism I have for the Chargers, but I'm sure it's something that they're well aware of. What's your grade here for the Chargers?
So if all goes well, and like you said, they don't have to rely on that lack of depth too much. This is definitely a good group. I put them at a B. I that Storm Norton spot just really makes me nervous. And you're limiting your upside because again, Filer's best spot is at tackle. He's not as good of a guard, even though he is a good player overall. Zion Johnson is a rookie. While I have high hopes and I'd bet a lot of money again on him being good, I think you can count on that. But again, a rookie next to your fifth best offensive lineman isn't great. And then if you have to go into that depth, you don't love it. So I have a B, still a good group. You and I famously quote unquote bash the Chargers on my podcast once, so I don't want to do that here on accident. These top three guys especially, great. Top four guys, add Zion Johnson, I think great. For those four, might be as good as any four in the league. But that right tackle spot just really, really gives me a lot of anxiety, and then the depth is tough to see.
And things return to their rightful order here, as I have a slightly lower grade than you do here.
Thank goodness.
But I'm basically in agreement with everything you're putting out. I'm going to B- on this. The depth is dragging the grade down, and the fact that Storm Norton, to me, there's a lot of offensive linemen who are upgradable. To me, I'm not even sure Storm Norton is good depth, to be honest. And yet here he is looking like he may be the starter. So that bothers me too a lot. But maybe he's developed more in the offseason than we've been able to have access to. So I think they're B-. I think as long as they stay healthy, they could be really good. They could be up there with the good offensive lines at the top of the league. But that's a lot to ask, that your entire offensive line stay healthy for a whole season.
Yep.
And so for that reason, I'm dragging them back down into the B- category. And I think we're covering it pretty well there. Anything else you want to talk about the Chargers here?
Unless you want me to just keep talking about Filer at right tackle, but that's that's about it. I'm going to continue to comb for reasons why Jamari Sawyer fell to the 6th round. It still makes no sense to me. So good on them for snagging him there. So that's about it.
Yeah. And sometimes I think you see this with younger guys. I don't think you see it with older guys as much. I think younger guys, I've seen it with Brett Beach in the general manager spot with some of the Chiefs free agents. Sometimes, and I'm alluding by younger guy to the Chargers head coach, sometimes you just get a feeling about a guy and you get attached to a guy, and your experience hasn't been there long enough to kick in and say, well, maybe you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket here. Even if you do like the guy, maybe not everything should hinge on him being successful this season. So,
right.
That might be leading to the Storm Norton stuff. Who knows? We'll find out as the season goes along. So,
yep, we'll see.
Tell everybody where they can find you at.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Simon_Short. Short has 2 T's on it. Go see all my stuff there. I do my written work for fansportsindustries.com. And you can go find the Simon Short podcast on Apple and Spotify. Currently doing a tour of the NFL, doing an in-depth look at every division. So head over there and check those out. Ben's on a couple of those episodes. So appreciate everybody listening to this and checking anything else out that we do.
Simon, I've enjoyed it. For those of you wondering, yes, we are going to go back through and get the best, the top 10 tackles and the top 5 centers in football and all that good stuff. And eventually, when we get done doing all the individual teams, we're going to go back through and do an entire ranking of the entire NFL offensive lines as well. So all of that stuff is upcoming throughout the summer. Thank you for watching us. We'll see you next time. Bye.